Okay, we'll start with the Book of Thomas. And the Book of Thomas is not canonized, which means that the religious leaders of the day decided it wasn't to be in what we know now as the Bible. There are lots of books missing from the Bible. The Bible has been corrupted so that people believe in a God, an omniscient, omnipotent, worship me or you'll die, that is external to you. That's how they've corrupted the Bible, and they've done that in many, many ways. And one of the ways they've done it is by not putting books into the Bible. Now, I'll be revealing the meaning of names and stuff. Now, the Book of Thomas has caused lots of how do you put it? It's generated a lot of interest in religious circles, but they don't understand it. They can't get their heads around it. And the reason it wasn't put in the book is because it compromises the corruptions of the Bible. It reveals a lot. So we won't put that in there. We don't want them, that's you, to know that. And that's how they've suppressed information. And the Bible itself is about human psychology and human physiology. In this modern world of tech, whenever you buy something, it comes with a user handbook, a car, a kitchen, electronic kitchen implements, televisions. They all come with instructions on how to operate it. But nobody's taught any of us how to operate this and this. Nobody's taught us how it works. We've got doctors that treat symptoms but rarely treat the cause of illness. And we've got a system of government, meant means mind, that governs your mind. They tell you what you should know and what you shouldn't know. So when you recognize that as a very simple and very obvious truth, then you'll start to recognize that man's way is shit. It really is just shit. Now, the Book of Thomas is what they refer to as a Gnostic text. And the Gnostic means knowledge, knowing. And some of you might have read it. I'll include a link in the description for the PDF so you can download it and read it yourselves. And for many of you, it will make absolutely no sense at all. But that's okay, that's fine. Because I'll explain what each saying is. There's 114 sayings, and each saying is separate. But before I start going into the sayings, I've got to set some basic understandings of how the... how do you put this? I've got to set a context so you know what's going on psychologically and physiologically, all right? And this isn't about men in the Middle East thousands of years ago. It's not. It's about you, the individual. And the same applies to when you read the Bible. If you're reading about Moses, it's you. If you're reading about Aaron, or in Hebrew, Aaron, which means enlightened, that was Moses' brother, then that's you. Moses in Hebrew is Moshe. It means he draws out. And it's symbolic of the limbic system drawing out the cerebrospinal fluid with the sacred secretion in it, the new wine. And Aaron, enlightened, is your neocortex. So working together. And it's all about you, the individual. Now, Moses was a bit of a madman. He'd running around and smashing things and barking orders. That's because he's symbolic of the limbic system. Bit of a hothead, emotional. And Moses couldn't speak very well. Well, people that are in the limbic system seldom can. So God said, it's okay, I'll send your brother. He'll speak for you. And that's the neocortex, reason, logic, rationale. Okay? And and that's pretty much how that works. So if you're reading other biblical stories like Cain and Abel, you know, you've got to look at yourself and try and understand it from that perspective, because if you're putting it out into the world and not applying it to yourself, then it's worthless. It's just worthless. So, and all of these stories are allegory. They're symbolism, it's metaphor, and it's really deep stuff. And when you have enough knowledge to unpack these stories yourself, they take on a different meaning. And when you start reading the book as your own life story, it takes on a very profound meaning. And it becomes very personal. There are aspects or stories in that book that you can apply to thousands, if not millions, of incidences in your own life, and how you've reacted or responded to life's trials and tribulations. And of course, when you start to recognize that you're not really in charge, you're just running a program which is constantly in the past, which is the ego intellect that's experiencing the illusion of separation. You're just repeating the same patterns, and that's karma. Now, the Western way of thinking has perverted karma. They say, oh, instant karma. You know, karma is, if you do something good, it comes back. There's an element of truth to that, but that's not what karma means exactly. Karma is, if you're repeating the same cycles, the same psychological patterns, nothing will change. You're living in the past. You're repeating the same patterns of behavior. And those patterns of behavior have become like well-trodden pathways in your brain. It's the same thing over and over again, repeating itself. Somebody said something and you react in that way. Why? Because something happened a long time ago and it worked then. So now it's just repeating the same thing, the same thing, the same thing. Young kids do it, you know. They're very difficult to reason with when they're about, 10, 8, 9 years old. They're getting older. And that's their ego. And it's set, right, that's the way I'm going to do it. And I'm not going to deviate from it. And that's, when they start to rebel and they're against their parents and everything. It's because they're trying to fit into a world that's really confusing. And they're trying to establish an identity. And to establish an identity, they do the same thing over and over again. So mum or dad will say, no, don't do that. But the child just continually does it. But the child's neocortex, hasn't formed yet. So reasoning with the child is really difficult. Now Jesus, the character, said, be like a child. But he's referring to like your 2 or 3 year olds or younger, where they're completely carefree and fearless, and they're not having thought because the ego hasn't formed yet. The ego forms at around the age of 7, and it starts to build itself up. But prior to that, it hasn't established any pathways in the brain. It's still making them. It's still trying to understand. Later on in life, that's when the rebellion starts. Teenagers do strange things. Goths, emo, punk, hip hop, they're all trying to fit into, well, who am I? Oh, I like that. That's who I am. Of course it's not. It's just an act. And children are acting up. But this act carries on into adult life. People identify with their past. And they're trying to project that past into the present moment. And the future doesn't work because it's a lie. It's not who you are. I'm a veteran, but I'm not. That's the past. It doesn't exist. It only exists here. It's an illusion. But other people insist on that illusion. So their karma, their illusions of their past is trying to affect mine. So things can get difficult when you're trying to overcome that. And you overcome that by cleaning your house, eating the right stuff, and meditation, which cleans the psychology. That cleans that part of the house out. Now, there's 114 sayings. Now, they're not verses. Each saying is a specific saying. And they're difficult to understand. I'm going to go through each saying and I'll explain what it is, what it means, what it's alluding to. Now, this is my knowledge, which has become my experience, and it is then the wisdom that is given to me. Now, words have meaning. You've got to get it. You've got to get beyond your accepted meaning of a particular word. So, even names, the Book of Thomas, and people are flippant about it. You can't be. You've got to be investigative. You've got to seek things out. So the Gospel of Thomas. Well, we'll ignore the Gospel a bit because that's the God spell. Now, the people that run this world, they use words to cast spells, spelling, cursive, curses, and so on and so forth. And they use these words to project their illusions onto you. Politicians do it all the time. Television, neural linguistic programming, subliminal programming. You'll watch a film and you'll watch, like, The Wizard of Oz. And it has face value. Oh, it's just a film. There's a young girl and there's a tornado in Kansas and she's in this really weird place and she's got to go and meet the wizard. It's just a children's story, but that's face value. The wise amongst you will recognize that it's more esoteric. Now, esoteric means hidden. What the masses are generally given is exoteric. That's common knowledge, but the esoteric is hidden. So you have to ask yourself, what's doing the hiding? The government are hiding from things. The government are fucking idiots. Again, you have to look at yourself. So you have to understand that your own mind is hiding things from you. And when you understand that, then you realize that you have a resident evil, if you will. Your mind, your own intelligence is working against you. And that's why cleaning the house and meditation is so important. So take nothing at face value. Right, and as I read the Book of Thomas, I'll explain what things mean and how they fit together. And I'll explain the sayings and I'll extrapolate on it as much as I can so you can get as much from it as you possibly can. And then you'll start to see the processes involved in the way I look at the text and the way I understand it. Now, some might say, oh, Danny, but that's just your interpretation. Well, I accept that. But look at everyone else's interpretation then. Look at all those people, because they're studying this in Harvard. And I've listened to their professors and stuff. They're miles off. They haven't got a clue because they're still in the box. And that's the box you've got to break out of. Now, this text is for the initiated. It's not for people that haven't been initiated yet. It's a secret. You shouldn't know this. Shh. Yeah? Right. The initiation is the Kundalini. It's the serpent that goes into the garden. The Garden of Eden is your brain. Adam is your ego intellect, and Eve is your subconscious mind. Now, when you have the Kundalini experience, because your house is clean, the serpent, which is the divine feminine, she goes into your mind, and it happens with the sacred secretion ascending. This is the Christos, the anointing oil, the ascension of the Christ. It goes into the brain. And then everything you believed in just disappears, and you're naked. And you look for things to clothe yourselves with. Oh, I'm a veteran. You see? And then God said, who told you you're naked? You see? It's only after the Kundalini experience that the thing called God, call it whatever you want, comes on the scene and says, who says you're naked? Who told you that? You're not naked, you see? Now, when you have these experiences surpass knowledge. We have religious leaders and we have politicians, and they have lots of knowledge, but they have no experience and they have no wisdom. Wisdom. Wiz means wise, obviously, and dumb means master. A wise master. Now, I'm not a wise master. I am just an ego intellect talking to you. But I've been initiated, without sounding like a pompous twat. And the wise master is my own higher consciousness. And that higher consciousness is referred to by many names. The most popular name in the Western world is Jesus. Other names are Horus, Krishna, Ra, Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, and the list goes on and on. They encapsulate, they embody the same thing, the same understanding. So who is representative of the ego intellect? Well, that's the Apostle Paul. But the Apostle Paul was experiencing the illusion of separation. And that's why he said, I am your Father. But Jesus said, nobody's your Father, but Father in heaven, which is higher consciousness, outside of the human experience, accessed via meditation. And this is where people get terribly confused. And confusion is of Satan. Satan just means adversary or opponent. It's the opponent of higher consciousness. It's where human intelligence, the ego intellect, their Apostle Paul, gets in the way and causes them to stumble. And you get him out the way via meditation. And it all becomes really simple. So in effect, everybody is Jesus pretending to be the Apostle Paul. But when you overcome the illusion of separation, your ego intellect is no longer trying to be the master. It then becomes a servant. Because it's a tool. It's a tool to be used to interface, to communicate. And you need an ego intellect. A child that can't speak yet or walk doesn't have an ego intellect. It's looked after and nurtured for many years. And then the ego intellect comes on the scene. But the ego intellect then learns that it's the master, which is wrong. When the ego intellect learns that it's not the master, it's merely a servant to the master. The master is higher consciousness, your own consciousness. Then things start to happen for you. And it takes away all the shame, all the guilt, blah, blah, blah. It removes all that. Because then you realize that the ego intellect that is experiencing the illusion of separation is an emperor with no clothes. It is the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. Don't look behind the curtain. Remember the film? And when it's exposed, it loses its illusion of authority. And you recognize it as just a program of faded memories being repeated. Karma. And that's what you're trying to change. Right. Because of the camera on my phone, it's reversed. As I've said before, the description, in the description box, the PDF is there. So you can download the PDF and read it yourselves, which I recommend. Again, try not to read for understanding. Just read. Okay? Let your ego intellect, the Apostle Paul, read it. Okay? And in time, as the Apostle Paul starts to receive knowledge and then he responds, then he'll have experiences which will remove the illusion of separation. Okay, and then your ego intellect will no longer be your worst enemy. Your intelligence won't be against you, it will assist you. But the ego intellect is always running behind your higher consciousness. The ego is not conscious. It's not. It's just a program. Much in the same way as that the internet could be expressed as consciousness, but a PDF document could be expressed as the ego intellect. It's just information that repeats itself. Okay, so try and think of things like that and simplify things. Don't make things complicated. Right then, the Gospel of Thomas, translated by Thomas O. Lambdin. These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke, and which Didymus Judas Thomas wrote down. Now, the living Jesus. Now, this is your higher consciousness, your individual conscious awareness that allows you to function in this reality. Now, your ego is attached to that. Your ego intellect is not consciousness. Right? It is a separate thing that is facilitated by consciousness. And the two need to recognize each other. Okay, the two need to become one. The Apostle Paul is symbolized as a wolf. He came from the tribe of Benjamin, and they use a wolf in their shield. And he is the proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing. Okay, and Jesus is often referred to as the Lamb, and there's more to that which I'll explain later. It's written that the wolf and the lamb will lie together. Okay, so that the two come together. And the lamb looks after the wolf, and the wolf protects the lamb, and so on and so forth. Now, the living Jesus is your consciousness. It's like in the Bible it says, God is a God of the living. God is your brain. Okay? Right. Didymus is Greek, and it means twin. Now, you are two. So you have your ego intellects that you might identify with. Oh, that's me. But then there's the consciousness, which is always there. If it wasn't, you'd be dead. So you are two. Twins. Judas, you trace that word back to ancient Hebrew, and the word is Yahuda, and it means related to Yah, and Yah is the biblical God. Okay, and the name is Yahweh, which comes from Yod-He Wah-He, and you can trace it back to the word higher. Ahaya, Ashar, Ahaya, where God introduced himself on the mountain as the burning bush. The burning bush is your brain, of course. And he said, I am that I am. Ahaya is I am. And higher is Yah, going left and right, indicative of continual existence. Now, of course, the I am is I, the individual, and am is a state of being, a state of awareness, a state of consciousness. And it's also a phase that you will slip into in meditation when your brain waves slow down. You become the I am. And the I am was there before the ego came. The I am came from the void, the field of potential, the unified field. So when you're experiencing the I am, you will also experience the unified field, because the two are the same thing. One observes the other. So when you experience the I am, you are also experiencing the unified field. That's why Jesus said, I and the Father are one. Okay? So Judas wasn't a traitor. And Yahuda means related to Yah, that's the individual. And a collective is referred as Yahudum, which means many people related to Yah. And Thomas it's a Hellenized name. It came from ancient Hebrew, and it was Toam. And when they Hellenized it, in other words, they translated it into Greek, they put an S on the name, because male names had an S on the end. It's indicative of male. So Thomas. And Thomas also means, or Toam also means twin. So we haven't even started reading the sayings yet, and there's so much information there. You know what I mean? It's just a basic introduction. These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke and which Didymus Judas Thomas wrote down. That's just the opening gambit. And there's so much information in that, and people just gloss over it, take nothing at face value. Okay? Now you're lucky, because I've gone through all the shit to get to that. But it was given to me. Because when you tap into that higher consciousness, you just have these, oh shit, yeah, now I get it. And things become much clearer. Saying one whilst we're here. And he said, whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death. Whoa. That's a pretty big deal, isn't it? Yeah, that's quite, that's saying number one. So he's basically saying to you is that if you can interpret this, you won't experience death, which implies immortality or infinity. Well, when your ego intellect becomes one with higher consciousness, that's described as being known. And you know gnosis, knowledge of knowing nothing, which is the unified field. You understand then that your consciousness is infinite. It has no beginning, it has no end, it has no time. It just is. It is I am. That's it. So only the physical can pass, but the consciousness can't. It just, because everything's conscious. And it's all energy. It's electromagnetic energy and light. So, whoever finds these interpretations of these sayings will not experience death. That's quite a big deal. The first time I read this document was several years ago, and it was baffling. I then read it again, and I understood it. And I'll say this now, because if I was to say, yeah, I understood it because I'm a really smarty pants, that's not how this works. My consciousness has risen to a point where I can think outside the box. And when you're thinking outside the box is the three-dimensional time-space. Information is given to you from a realm of higher consciousness, and then you recognize it as truth because it's always simple, and then you have the eureka moment, the light goes on, the illumination. And there's another side to that as well, which I'll probably cover in future videos. But everything suddenly starts to make sense, and it's profoundly simple. But whenever religion gets its hands on something, the first thing they do is they externalize it from you. So if you're looking at anything and you're externalizing it, you're on the wide path. If you're reading this book, and we'll flip it open, this is Hosea, and you're reading about Hosea. He's a prophet, and he's talking about Israel's immorality, and Israel will return to God. then you've got to become Hosea. So you're reading it as if it's you, because then you're internalizing it, do you see? And that's where the magic is. Israel will return to God. Now, Israel is not that country in the Middle East. The world is a stage. It's external to you. It's a distraction. If you trace the etymology of the word Israel back to ancient Hebrew, the word is Ishi, Sarah El. Ishi means individual. You. Not a group. Not a hive mind collective. You. So Ishi, individual. Sarah means to struggle or fight, resist or overcome. And El. And so how do you, now El is God, which is your brains, it's also symbolic of electricity. It's all about energy. So, but how do you struggle with God? You meditate and you try to overcome those pathways that have been well trodden. And you're clearing the house out, both metaphysically, your psychology. Psychology is Greek. It means science of the soul. And you're cleaning the body to get that energy moving. The energy is the Kundalini, of course. Right then. 2 sentences and we're at 30 minutes. And I've got to put it across like that so people can understand, because I'm laying a foundation that you can walk on and really start to understand these texts as an individual. This is not a hive mind, collective, fellowship nonsense. Now, you can go and do that in a church. You can go and sit in some pastured valley with a nice stream and all the sheep around and sing Kumbaya, and it will do fuck all. It's just a shit show. The individual, right, has to have these internal, individual realizations and experiences for themselves. That's it. And it's about understanding the text and responding. Understanding the text is just knowledge. But then responding is to transmute that knowledge into experience. And then stuff will start to happen in the body. Your psychology will change. Things will look a bit different. You might feel a whole bit different. And then, in time, wisdom comes. Wisdom, the wise master. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And then a whole load of things start to make a lot more sense. As above, so below. As within, so without. And then you start to really appreciate these ancient texts, despite the fact that they've been raped and pillaged by religious morons and people that wanted to suppress the knowledge, to suppress your minds. Religion keeps people stupid and politics keeps people poor. All that shit's got to go. Take care, folks.